On the content creator spectrum, I lean a lot more towards influencer than I do filmmaker, which leads a lot of people to assume that I lean a lot more towards iPhone shooting than I do anything remotely technical with a camera. And while I would never dare to call myself an expert, every YouTube video on this channel and most of my content over on Instagram, especially the content that is sponsored, was shot with this camera. And so in this video, I thought it would be fun to walk you through every lens that I own as a creator whose primary focus is her Instagram feed and this YouTube channel. This is definitely not a review of my gear, nor is it a deep dive into the individual lenses. I do actually have plans for that though, which you can help me figure out towards the end of this video. But this is more just an introduction to each lens, why I bought it, and what I have actually found myself using it for, and if I've really been using it at all. First, a disclaimer for anybody who is just getting into cameras with interchangeable lenses. You need to be mindful of whether you are shooting on or looking to buy a camera with a cropped sensor or a full frame one, because the exact same lens will look different depending on which you go for. I shoot on the Canon RP, which is a full frame camera, which will be able to use the entire field of view of all of my lenses. But that isn't going to be the case if you're shooting on a cropped sensor. For example, Canon's cropped sensor APS-C cameras have a crop factor of 1.6, which means your frame of view will be 1.6 times smaller than a full frame camera, giving the illusion of being more zoomed in. Okay, let's get into it. We're gonna go in purchase order, beginning with the Canon RF 35mm 1.8 lens, which is actually the one that I'm shooting on right now, and it's the one that I shoot the majority of my YouTube videos on. When I first got my Canon RP, there were not a lot of lenses on the market, especially not ones that I could afford. But I was still really intentional and excited about this focal length, especially because it is considered a classic focal length. It is said to be really similar to what our eyes can see, so it's very natural. And it just made a lot of sense as an influencer who envisioned taking it out to do more like lifestyle shooting around the city, where you want to be able to capture yourself, the subject, as well as a decent amount of the background. And I have had zero regrets, and it is easily my most used lens. It has also kind of decently done the trick for vlogging. This is me an arm's length away from the camera. It's wide enough that you can still see a little bit of the background, but not too zoomed in that my face is obnoxiously close to you. But it still isn't like completely ideal for vlogging because my arm has to be like this. Then I got the Canon RF 50mm and 85mm at the same time. If I'm being really honest, I think both of these purchases were a byproduct of my gear acquisition syndrome, because I just got so fixated on them and I felt like I needed to have them. So first, let's talk about the 50. My last camera was the Canon Rebel XSI, which my father-in-law had passed on to me. This was a cropped sensor camera, but I had the 50mm lens for it. And this lens was my absolute favorite lens. It was a lens I really depended on as I started to play more with photography. I loved using it to take portraits. I loved how you could focus on the subject while still getting that really creamy, blurry background. So when they announced it for the new Canon R series that my camera fell into, I knew I had to have it. So the 50 is a little bit more narrow than the 35. It is also said to be pretty close to what the human eye can see. It's a very classic natural lens. It's definitely a little too narrow to vlog on, but I do think it is great for capturing like some detail shots or some content where I really want to be the focus and I don't care about the background, right? This is the 50 for comparison. The other reason I felt like I absolutely had to have this lens ties into why I got the 85mm. And that is that photographers all across the internet, especially on YouTube, touted the combo of the 35, 50, and 85mm lenses as being the golden trio of lenses that every photographer has to have in their camera bag. And I truly felt that if I had all these three lenses, I would never want anything else again. And I'm pretty sure that's how I convinced Darren to have us splurge on these two lenses when we probably should have been saving. So that brings us to the 85. This focal length is just beautiful. It is not ideal for an influencer or content creator who is shooting her own content. This is why. This is still like 2 feet away from the lens. You can imagine how far I would need to put this camera to be able to capture all of me. I'd have to go further back than the walls of my apartment would allow. So it is easily like my least used lens. I think at most I use it for like comparison photos or comparison videos, or when somebody else can shoot me. Darren, my husband, is fantastic. He's behind the camera for a lot of my shoots, but the majority of my shoots where I'm asking for his help are paid campaigns versus us just playing around and being creative. And when I'm doing a paid campaign, usually we want to showcase myself, the environment, the product. We're trying to capture a lot of information. So the 35mm makes a lot more sense than this. This is actually kind of helpful for detailed shots, but again, I'm not doing many of those. So love it, love it, love it, but don't use it. And that brings us to the next lens in our lineup. Woo, another beast of a lens. Again, I said to him, this will be the last lens I ever need, unless maybe I upgrade to L lenses. So this is the Canon RF 24-240 zoom. Prior to this, I was only purchasing and shooting on prime lenses, fixed focal lengths, you can't zoom them in or out, and then we were going on a trip. And I realized how inconvenient it would be to carry 3 different lenses and have to switch them out on the go to capture different things and risk getting my sensor dusty and dirty. And the only thing that really made sense to shooting travel content or anything on the fly was a zoom lens. And I wanted something that could cover just a huge range of focal lengths. So on the most widest spectrum, we have 24mm, usually kind of recommended for landscape photography. You can capture the wide, expansive scene before you. And then on the tightest side, or the most zoomed in side, we have 240mm. So I can capture something that is decently far away. And this lens has honestly been fantastic for its use case. I actually most recently used it at Darren's graduation. As he walked across the stage and walked around the convocation space, I was able to follow him like the paparazzi and zoom in and out accordingly. So you might be wondering, now that I have this zoom lens that covers so many different focal lengths, why I need my prime ones. And that is because this lens does have a couple downsides. The image quality overall isn't as good as a prime lens, and it has a variable aperture of 4 to 6.3. In the most layman terms possible, the lower your aperture number, the blurrier your background can be. So all of my other lenses range from a 1.8 to 1.2, meaning I can get like a pretty decent, nice separation between myself and my background. That aperture number also reflects how much light is getting let in, which means your lens has more low light capabilities. Because of the aperture on this one, it is not an ideal low light lens. Great for travel, great in the day, great for that variety, but it's got its limitations. And finally, drumroll, my 30th birthday present from my family, the Canon RF 16mm f2.8. As a 16mm, this is going to be especially wide. We're bordering on like a fisheye lens, and this goes even wider than the widest of my zoom lens. Usually landscape photographers are picking this up, or maybe people who are shooting like real estate, people who need to capture as much of the scene around them as possible. But this also has a great use case for influencers, content creators, YouTubers. Because it is so wide, it makes for a fantastic vlogging lens. Let me show you what I mean. Look at how much of my living room we capture now. It looks so bizarre. But it just makes a lot of sense if I'm vlogging and I want to hold my camera and actually show you the environment around me. This is pretty fresh in my arsenal, like literally, a week or 2 or 3 old by the time this video comes out, but I've already played with it a bit and am just so in love. So now I can pretty confidently say that I'm done with my lens purchases. My latest fixation has definitely been more along the lines of a camera body upgrade, the Canon R8, maybe someday. The R6 is actually the true dream, but the R8 just feels a lot more accessible for my budget and, you know, the type of content I create. Now here is where I need your help. I've been wanting to get more into sharing camera-related content because even though the space is definitely well saturated, I feel like a lot of the content here is targeted towards experts, professionals, or more advanced hobbyists, and targeted towards more traditional use cases versus that of an influencer. This video isn't actually my first toe dip into the space. I did a pretty fun video on how I'm working to overcome my gas, and I think it'd be pretty useful for anybody suffering the same problem. Anyways, I have a pretty big trip planned next month to Europe, and I thought it would be fun to use this as an opportunity to do a fun content challenge. For one day in each country, I wanted to restrict myself to one lens. I'd vlog the day with the lens, giving you real life content examples, and I'd share more what I love about the lens, its shortcomings, and just give a deeper dive into what it's like to actually use it. I think we can also see where this idea would be kind of fun and maybe awkward to shoot. So here are the countries on my itinerary, and here are the lenses that I currently have. Which lens do you think best fits each location? Let me know below because I have been agonizing unnecessarily over this for the past month. And that's it. I'm looking forward to geeking out some more with all of you. Thanks for watching, and until next time.